I just got an email from one of your colleagues, um, who's Alex Paris. She's not able to come tonight, but let me see if I can get to it here. She wanted me to show this flyer, that this conference is happening. She says it's kind of expensive, but they have, it's $99 for students, I guess. So it's, in a couple of weeks now, but it's at the Weston Oaks in the Galleria, and the Thanatology Association. I forget what ADA is, Association of Death Educators, something like that. But let me get out of this and read her email about it. The Association for Death Education and Counseling is having its annual conference in Houston at the Weston Oaks. It's the second week of April. It's a bit expensive to register, but student membership is also only $99 for a year, and discounts the regular conference pricing. So, and ADEC is the professional organization for thanatology and also publishes 2 excellent journals, which members have full access to. So, I offer that to you, and I will post that flyer on our on Canvas in the announcements area, so that you guys and anybody listening to this later can have access to that. But that's a great thing to bring forth. And if you guys come up with anything else, or you have something that you wanted to share that people would be interested in attending or watching on online or on TV or anything like that, just put it all in. You can put it in the open forum section of the discussion board, or you can send it to me and I can post it, or you can bring it to one of our classes and announce it. Any of those things, I'm always open to that. So everyone now should have received an email from me about your assignment for the group project. If you haven't, please contact me after class. Send me an email or send me a text, because it's urgent that right away. What else did I want to say about that? I think that's all you need to know. And if you had any questions or concerns about that, or if you're having trouble reaching your classmate or or the person that you're supposed to be interviewing, let me know as soon as possible. Sign up for the group check-in as soon as possible. After tonight, I will post this video and also the link for the group check-in and the group presentation, so that'll all be in one place for you and the announcements. So make sure that you sign up for those. But if you're having difficulty, you don't have to wait for the check-in to let me know, because I want to help as soon as I can to resolve any of those issues. Because as you know, these half semester courses go very quickly. So everything should be open now. All of the assignments should be open. If you encounter something that's not, the only thing that should not be open right now is quiz number 2. So quiz number 1 and all of the assignments should be open, so that you can move through these things at your own pace. Some students like to front load things so that they have, when it comes to the presentation, they have everything else done. So I was always one of them that left everything go to the last minute. So don't be like me. Does anybody have any questions or anything that you wanted to bring to the table tonight? The plan is that I have fairly brief lecture on grief counseling. How to, just sort of the mechanics of grief counseling and grief groups. So it's pretty short. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to answer your questions. And I think I saw something in the chat. Do we have to reply to our classmates' responses in the discussion? Yes. That will enhance that's all part of your participation grade. So you have to respond to each question of there's 3 questions, you respond to each, and you should at least respond to one colleague per question. And it should be, as I said last week, substantive responses. So not just, way to go, or I agree, have something more to add to the conversation and engage in that. And the more you engage, the better your grade. But numbers don't tell the whole story. If you are engaging in a very meaningful way and in those 3 responses to their responses, then you're good. Then that's 2/3 of your grade that you have an A, the participation grade. And then the other third is simply attending 6 presentations from your colleagues. So any other questions or comments or anything anybody wanted to add from last week?
Just to clarify on that really quick.
Okay.
So 3 responses.
Right.
Would you prefer that, I guess, 3 separate responses, right? Like 3 instead of, I thought I heard you say like per question within there. And so I was almost wondering like,
Okay,
do we
so
want?
so there's 3 questions. So you respond to each question, and then all of your colleagues will respond to each question. You just respond to at least one of those for each question. Okay. So 6 altogether or more. Okay, so 3 responses to 3 original responses, and then 3 responses to the responses. Okay, 1 for each question.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
I know response is kind of I'm using it too loosely, but you understand now, right?
I
Okay.
believe I do.
Okay. Okay. So Hunter responds to question 1, 2, and 3. And Rachel responds to 1, 2, and 3, and Hunter's responses to 1, 2, and 3, or somebody else's. So
Yeah, I think I was conceptualizing a little bit as a post, like they would all be
okay.
in the
Okay.
same.
There
So
you go.
that's a little
All
bit
right.
of what I'm like. Is
So
it
3
one?
posts, and then a response to a post on each discussion question. Okay.
Can I add on to this real quick? I think it's a little confusing because you're saying question, but it's each discussion board is one
Right.
question.
Right.
But within that
Okay.
discussion board, there are multiple questions. So
Okay.
we each answer one discussion, like I have one response to discussion board number 1, and I answer the
Right.
multitude of questions in that discussion board, and that counts as one response of
Correct.
mine, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Because there
you.
are multiple
Yeah.
questions in the
There are.
discussion
Yeah.
post. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all kind of interrelated, and some people
Sure.
take it question by question, and some people just do a paragraph that this is my response, and they're able to do it that way. So yes, okay, discussion board posts. Each discussion prompt or each discussion post 1, 2, and 3 you respond to. And then you look at your colleagues and you say, I'm going to engage with this colleague on this post. And then you do that for one colleague per discussion board. Okay.
Yeah, so like 2 posts then.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
One original, one in response. Yeah. At
Just
least.
hitting all of the questions, but posting
Yeah.
within that one thing. Yeah, I got
Yeah.
you. It's all good.
At least one. I mean, if you engage more, that's better for your education and it's also better for your grade. So. And but the quality of your response is what I'm looking for, that you're really engaging with the subject. You're thinking about it and you're giving a thoughtful answer to the questions. So,
Thank you for walking with me down that meandering
sorry.
mathematical journey.
No, I'm the meanderer, so I appreciate it.
All
Yeah.
good.
So, anything else? Okay. And again, if you're going through stuff and you find something that you don't understand, or you get a link that's somehow not working, I think I tried them all, but or if a date looks wrong or something else is confusing, just reach out to me. And again, text is the most efficient way of reaching me. So, and some of you have used it and hopefully had a satisfactory response in the time frame you expected. So I want to be as available to you as I can, because I know that this is a quick time and there's a lot of work. So, okay. So this, from the beginning. This set of slides is in your in just the slides in a PDF form, is in your Canvas. Can you see it all now? Can you see grief counseling?
Yes.
Okay, good. So like I said, this is just some practical tips for that. You will have read, the information about uncomplicated grief, normal grief reactions. That's really good information that you will use when you're with clients and helping them to navigate this. And you've seen in your text, hopefully already, that most people navigate without needing additional assistance. They encounter losses, they have resources, internal and external resources that help them get through, but sometimes they need a little bit more help. And so grief counseling is a way to help people who have the uncomplicated grief reactions in a just to sort of give them a little bit more support and help them through the difficult times. Later we'll be talking about later in the course, and by later I mean like next week. You'll see information about grief therapy, and grief therapy is for those individuals that are stuck somewhere in their mourning process. They are not able to get past, what you've read about the tasks of mourning. They get stuck somewhere in there, and they are not adapting to the loss. And so grief counseling is much more formal and much more involved. And like I said, you'll see that in a lecture in your course materials next week. So this we're talking about is grief counseling. So grief counseling can be less formal than therapy, but it doesn't have to be. So, some people will meet at a Starbucks and they'll sit and they'll have a conversation. It'll be more informal. Sometimes it is in an office or, at a place that's a little bit more private. But it's really client driven. So like I said, they're client directed, client driven, and it's to assist the client in accepting the loss, experiencing that pain and other emotions associated with loss, which is that, that task of mourning, that we have to experience all those difficult emotions, adapting to the new normal, finding a place for the loved one in a new way, and that's meaning making, which is task 3 of Worden's tasks, and identifying any kind of complicated grief that may require more focused and more therapeutic interventions. So what are the things that we can do in grief counseling? Number 1 in grief counseling is normalizing those feelings, thoughts, cognitions, and behaviors that we looked at in the beginning materials in this course. So many people will come to you and they're like, I think I'm crazy. I keep losing my keys, or I'm confused sometimes, or I feel like I'm walking around in a fog. I keep thinking that I'm seeing my loved one who's died, and I'm just a jumble right now. And you can help them by saying, you know what, here's all these things that are very common. And as time goes on, they will reduce. But right now you're in the beginning of your grief, and these are absolutely normal things that people experience. And sometimes that in and of itself can help people just take a big, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm not, going off the deep end here. This is just all part of it. And it can kind of help them almost embrace what's happening and what they're going through as something that people who grieve go through. What else can you do? Talking, giving clients a safe place to tell their stories. And with that talking, I should say, comes listening. Even in grief therapy, 90% plus of what we do is listening. And letting people, as I say here, tell their stories, tell the stories of their loved ones, speak their name. So many times people that they encounter will be uncomfortable. They don't want to talk about the death, or they don't want to talk about that loved one because they're afraid that it'll make the grieving person sadder, or set them out to more emotional displays that they would find uncomfortable. There's a video that's in the stuff that you'll be watching that I just love. I just added it this term about moving forward, and the woman talks about how when her husband died, the people around her looked for other people in that situation and tried to smush them together and put them in a place so that they wouldn't get their sad all over everyone else. And so when people come to you, they want a place where they can put their sad all over the place and talk about their loved one and talk about what they're feeling, and maybe talk about the death, and also talk about their loved one's life and what they're feeling, and what they're remembering. So that talking, that listening is so very important. And that's a skill that we have as social workers. It's not something that everybody is good at. It's not something that everybody does. I may tell this again, so don't judge me for telling stories a couple of times, but when I was in graduate school at the GCSW, we had a course where in family therapy, and we were each given a role to play. And we had these, those big Duplo blocks that little kids use to build things. And we would have each had a pile of blocks, and we would, when it was our turn to talk, we would put a block down on the building, whatever we were building together. And what we found was, even though we were all playing a role and we were all just pretending, even in that sense, we were all had a block in our hand and we're just poised, waiting for the person before us to finish talking so that we could talk and put the block down. And what we learned from that, and what I hope you learned from this, is when you're dealing with clients of any kind, but especially with clients who are grieving, you put your block down and you fold your hands on your lap and you listen. That you're not waiting till it's your turn to talk, that it's always their turn to talk. And then, then it's your turn to provide support. But that listening is so very, very important. And I was told, myriad times when I worked in hospice, that was, the biggest gift to a lot of people, was just to have somebody that would sit and listen to them. So enough said, but that's a big part of grief counseling and grief therapy. Other interventions like letter writing or journaling or empty chair techniques, where they are given an opportunity to get those feelings out, to express them, to say things that maybe they left unsaid or were not able to say because the death was maybe sudden or unexpected. The empty chair technique is and the letter writing can be to the person who died and is talking with them, picture them in this empty chair, or write a letter to them, or do a journal to them, or just do any one of those things to get your feelings out. Imagine that, somebody else is in that chair, or that you're in that chair and you're talking to yourself. How would you comfort yourself? Those kinds of things can be used in grief counseling. Using art or music, poetry, help, and anything that that might be something that is a special gift that your griever, that your client brings to the table, asking them how they express things. Even the timeline that you guys are going to be doing later in the course can be used in an artistic way, or just in a way to kind of help them, guide them through the process of showing them how they survived losses in the past, and helping them to know how to draw on some of those strengths for the future. And then cognitive behavioral techniques, looking with them at the interplay between their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, and how paying attention to or noticing one helps to affect the other two. So cognitive behavioral techniques and acceptance and commitment therapy techniques are often used in grief counseling as well as grief therapy. With both individuals and groups, it's really important to set goals. So talking with the individuals, or, what are you struggling with? What do you want to feel like? What are your expectations when you are through or have, navigated this, grieving process? What do you want that to feel like? What do you expect? And what do you envision your life to be like when these sessions are done? Individual goals can be simple, like, I want to be able to go, to to church and not break down and cry every time, because that's where I spent, time with this loved one. Or I want to be able to go to a baseball game and not be sad, because that's where my dad and I, spent our summers. I want to be able to sleep better. Either I'm sleeping too much or I'm sleeping not enough.
Hi, I'm Too Good to Go.
Just one.
Whoever that is, could you mute, please?
There we go.
And I want to be able to focus on daily tasks without becoming distracted. So they can be simple like that, or they can be more complex, like, you know, I want to feel less guilty about not seeing my dad when he was sick. Maybe you couldn't go, or maybe it was just too uncomfortable, or, you know, whatever the reason, I want to feel less guilt about those last days. I want to stop feeling resentful towards my siblings or my spouse or whoever, for not doing enough, or, you know, not, or making me feel bad, or, you know, all of those things. So it can be more of a complex situation as well. But those are just examples of what some goals might be for grief counseling. In groups, it's also good to in the first session to develop a statement of purpose, or a mission statement, if you will. So this group exists for whatever reason. It may be that that's already given to you, like if you are in an organized group like Grief Share, or the American Cancer Society has a mission statement. So if it's an established group, so this is the one for the American Cancer Society. This group provides a place to connect with others who are going through loss, learn about the grieving process, and explore ways to cope and heal. So short, to the point, but it encompasses why you're there. And it gives you sort of the bones on which to build, you know, your sessions. So, and based on that statement of purpose, or that mission statement, the group should work with the social worker to establish their own goals based on the makeup of the group and the needs of the participants. So this could be very wide ranging, but some of those things could be to say, you know, some of the rules or the goals could be to create a safe space for sharing of feelings and thoughts, for the individual and group members to feel less isolated in the grieving process, to improve emotional reactions outside the group. So we're doing this so that we have a place to share, and also to help us when we're not here, and to be able to recognize and normalize feelings and behaviors. And along with those rules, those goals, come group rules, you know, sort of conduct, codes of conduct. So, and those would be around, how do we add new members? Is this a closed group? We're doing it for 8 weeks. If you're not in by the second week, then you have to wait. Or is it an open group, which people can join at any time? How do we address conflicts? What are our rules around that? Who can talk when? You know, if we have conflicts, do we step outside? Do we, you know, defer to the facilitator? Those kinds of things. How sharing can be managed. Like I said, when do you get to talk and when do you get to listen? Attendance expectations. You know, you're expected to, we're making a commitment to each other. So you're expected to be there every week. And if you miss more than 2, then maybe you need to sit it out. Punctuality too. And that just comes down to respecting the time of your colleagues, your fellow group members. How do we handle romantic relationships? In a teen group, say, you know, are we going to say no dating in a widowers group? You know, are we going to make rules about that? Or are we going to say this may be inevitable, but don't bring it into the group, you know? Or if you are going to do it, let's talk about it in the group. So it can go either way. And then, of course, rules surrounding confidentiality. And those are, you know, we're not going to talk about things out of group. And also, what happens if we meet somebody in the community? You know, how are we, what are we going to agree about what that is going to look like? You know, are we going to acknowledge each other? Are we going to ignore each other? Are we gonna say hello, but not tell the people that we're with how we know each other? Or, so those kinds of rules. And establish them so that there's there's always gonna be things that come up that you didn't expect, but try to cover as much as you can. And these are the big issues that usually arise when you're dealing with groups of any age and any size. So what are the benefits of a support group? The biggest one is, like I talked about in the beginning, to normalize your feelings and your grief reactions. Everybody is going to be like experiencing much the same thing. Maybe, with some variations, and some people to, maybe a greater intensity or a lesser intensity. But everybody is going to be able to say, yeah, I can relate to that. I feel that way, or I felt that way, and now I'm feeling better. So that in and of itself, to give sort of some hope to people that may be not as far along in the journey. It addresses feelings of loneliness and isolation that can come from being the griever in a society that isn't comfortable with grief and death. To find a place of belonging where there are other people that are feeling and experiencing the same things that you are feeling and experiencing. And a lot of these things you will see echoed when we, a little bit when you see the video that Marian Menken speaks from Bo's Place. Now, she's not talking, in her video, she's talking much more about children and grief, but she does interject some things, because I know one of our groups, I believe, is going to talk about Bo's Place, but that what that helps, and especially kids who feel so much of the other when they are around their peers who haven't lost a loved one, to have a place, a group where they can go and they have that sense of belonging, and that people understand what they're going through. A safe place, again, to tell your story. Education, it can be a place where you can share some of the information that you're learning in this course about the stages of grief, whatever model that you might choose to use for your group, and also the normal grief reactions and things like that. So it's a good place to provide education, and that might be built into each segment of your group meeting. And as I said, you get the benefit of everyone else's experience. And so those who are, maybe not as far along, it gives hope that things will get better and that you will feel better, but that you are forever changed, and that grief doesn't go away. But it does, your reaction to it, your resilience, and your ability to move forward does. And so that, a support group can really help with that. So what are some of the drawbacks to support groups? Some people may have emotions that can be overwhelming, especially if you are feeling overwhelmed by your emotions. And so being prepared for that, or as a facilitator, recognizing that, and being able to bring down the temperature a little bit, and maybe even identifying, as we said in the first slide, the people that need more than a support group or a counseling venue, that they need more intensive therapy, and providing those resources and referrals. Group members, may be judgmental or even hospitable. My grief is bigger than your grief. Or, you're not doing it right. Or, what, we've been meeting here a long time and you're new, so you just need to, wait your turn. So being able to address those behaviors is really important. And it's, it could be something that, is a drawback to some people in support groups. You may, if you don't choose your support groups wisely, you may receive incorrect information in a support group. You don't have to have a license to open a grief support group. You just have to, be able to have a venue. And now you don't even need a venue. You can just say, hey, I got a Zoom thing, click this link and we're ready to go. So it may be run by somebody that doesn't have the best information. So that's a risk when your clients are looking for support groups. There might be, other kinds of difficult group members, members that are, the expert or the person that always complains, the person that takes over the whole group and talks the whole time. All of those things could be a problem if you're in a group and you don't have a facilitator that is trained and ready to handle them. And the participant, as we said, may need more support than a peer-led or a facilitated peer-led group can offer. So they may need to, it may not be enough for them. And they may, actually hinder the progress of the other people in the group. So those are some of the drawbacks to support groups. But on the whole, for most people, even for people who are, experiencing some complicated grief, to have that place where they can feel a kinship and a belonging can help them, in addition to, getting some more intensive therapy. What are some of the barriers to support group attendance? Transportation. We have Bose Place, which is a great place. It's down by on the South Loop by Energy Stadium or whatever it's called now. And so that's not easy for people to get to. It's on public transportation. You might have to take several buses if you don't have a car. They do make it scheduled so that it takes into account people's work schedules, things like that. But transportation, can be an issue. Caring for others who can't be left alone. So if you were caring for both of your parents, one of them died, but you're still caring for the other one, you can't go to a support group. Even if it's down the street, you can't leave that loved one alone. If you have what many may feel is a stigmatized loss, and that could be anything from, some suicide, drug overdose, it could be that your loved one died while committing a criminal act. It could be that, your loved one was somebody that you were having an affair with. And those, those are losses that are devastating, but it's hard to find a place that, maybe you would feel accepted. So timing and location, as we talked about under transportation, lack of energy and motivation, grief. We saw in the first module, grief can overwhelm you and exhaust you. And so just finding a way to get up and get moving and get to a group can be difficult. Generally, you don't want to seek out a support group, but lots of support groups say until you're at least 6 weeks to 2 months past the initial loss. So you may have started regaining some of your energy then and maybe not. So that is a barrier. And also fear. During the lockdown period in COVID, we were all afraid of being around other people. And some people are still afraid of that. And it's instilled something in us about, safety and, people may be fearful about going outside. All of those things, or, because of the nature of the death, if it was a car accident, people may be fearful about going anywhere, especially going anywhere in a car or something like that. So all of those things, and I'm sure you can think of other barriers as well. There might be a language barrier, which I also didn't put in there, but that's another one, especially in a city as diverse as Houston. Later in the course, when we talk about culture, I'm going to have a whole lecture on social media and grief support. Certainly during COVID, we saw the rise of online support groups via Zoom. And so, that's certainly still out there a lot, and that takes care of some of the problems of access that we talked about. But also, Facebook and X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Reddit, all those others that I know I'm, way out of date on, but you guys know, provide a public forum for mourning and the ability to ask for support. And there's online grief groups, like there's chat rooms and bulletin boards that connect people, the other mourners, others experiencing similar losses. So there's survivors of suicide have an online grief group, or mothers who have lost children, or mothers who have miscarried or had stillbirths, or very specific losses. There are online grief groups for any number of different specific losses or losses in general. Even pet loss. There are many online forums and Facebook groups and things to support people through pet loss. And we are going to have a presentation for the first time since I've taught this class on pet loss and people who are supporting those in that grief. So stay tuned for that. But online grief groups. And also there's funeral homes. Pretty much all of them now have an online obituary for the loved one, and then a place for people to leave messages of support and to send flowers and make donations and things like that. So that is out there too. I think that's called Legacy for most of the funeral homes are in on that. The advantages are similar to other support groups, to get support from like-minded people who are going through the same thing and normalizing feelings. Plus, you have convenience and anonymity. So you can log on at 3 o'clock in the morning if you're having trouble sleeping and post something and get, see what other people have written to get support. The disadvantages are that it may increase isolation because you don't have to go out. So you stay in more and more. And there's a risk that you don't really know who you're conversing with. That's the other side of anonymity. And there's economic restrictions. It's, limited to people who have computer access and internet access, which is more and more people, but there's still a strata of our society that can't afford that. And so there's those people that are left out of that as well. The other disadvantage, and again, we will talk about this later in the course, is that you might not get it's open to bullying, people being cruel because it is anonymous, and you might not get the level of support that you want. You might pour your heart out and then, maybe get some likes when you really needed some people to respond and be more open with their support, more vocal with their support. So, like I said, we'll talk about that later, but I wanted to mention it as, an important outlet for group support in grief. Let me stop the share. Does anybody have any comments on that or any experience with grief groups, positive or negative, or with grief counseling? Anybody have any questions about the assignments coming up? We have the discussion board, I think, is due this week, this Sunday. The first discussion board post is due.
I have a random question that might, I'm not entirely through all of the reading, so it could be answered. But I was
Okay.
thinking a lot about like the meaning making and some of the activities. And I was wondering if there are certain attributes, not medical or like personal history, things like that, like trauma, but like being an artist or being a writer or certain attributes of people that help certain individuals move through certain phases of the process faster, like the meaning making. Would someone who's like a
Mhm.
creative storyteller or writer be able to do that more? Or I was just curious if they've ever looked into something like that.
You know, I mean, it's a good question. I personally think it has more to do with each individual's sort of resiliency, and all of those things that you will see in the gosh, the task and mediators. I couldn't think of the word. Sorry, the mediators of mourning. You know, the personality, their experience with loss. All of those things, I think, have more to do with how they will move through it. You know, I think that art and stuff. Fascinating question for a PhD. So, I think that that it has more to do with that. But you know, certainly art. But you know, people that aren't good with art, you know, can still find artistic expressions, you know, ways to express their, you know, oh, I can just do stick figures. Great, let's do stick figures. What does your family look like? You know, and what's different about your family now? Let's draw that. So all those things can still be powerful. And I guess it could be argued that people that are used to accessing that artistic or emotional side to them may be more adept at navigating that, but it also could be that they, you know, get more in the weeds of it. So,
I was actually
know.
wondering, like, in some ways, could that potentially actually complicate it? Like, if the perfectionism around it being like part of their art form
Yeah, yeah.
obstacle. It was just, yeah, it was just interesting, but perhaps a PhD question one day.
But no, it's a good question, and it's the type of thing that, you know, spurs you on to do more thinking about it, and you know, being more aware of it when you're dealing with your clients too. Most of my clients are like, oh, I'm terrible at art, and that kind of frees them up to be terrible, you know, like embrace the terrible and just, you know, do what you do, you know. So but then I've had clients that write poetry, and they've been able to find really meaningful expression that way. And you know, because there are some things that you think you can't put into words, but poets find a way to paint a picture with those words. And so and I've had clients that, you know, will write a song, or just a piece of instrumental music, you know, that they use to express those feelings. So yeah,
Right.
it can go many ways. Yeah.
I think the only other like meta question I guess I had, and I don't know enough like in-depth knowledge of religion, but the concepts of like believing in an afterlife, like
Mhm.
I'm curious if there's research on like did that stem from a coping mechanism for grief, or are those all culturally derived and then impact one's grief experience?
Well, I'm sure there's lots of anthropological stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just look at what helps,
Mhm.
you know, and some people, and, you know, that deep faith is not something that can be quantified, and it's not something that can be summed up in research. And there's people that have certain beliefs and some people have no beliefs. And in terms of, everybody has a belief, everybody has a spiritual life. And just in terms of a God or another being, and what that looks like, or not. But I think I call a spiritual life is whatever connects you to something that's greater than you. And so, and that connection can help you cope with life's suffering and difficulties, as well as augment life's joys. So for many people, probably the vast majority of people, that connection is with that greater thing than yourself is a God. Either, you know, and a separate being. And some people it is the earth, or nature. And some people it is quite simply love. You know, when you say God is love, that's what they mean, you know. And some people I had a client that in hospice, I had a client that was a huge Cubs fan, Cubs everywhere, memorabilia all over the walls of his nursing home. And one day the chaplain asked him, you know, what's this about? You live in Houston? And he said, well, I'm from Chicago. And when I was a kid, my dad and I would go to Wrigley Field and we would go to baseball games and we get a hot dog. And he, you know, talked about the whole experience. And his dad and him, his dad's dad, you know, would go with him. And when I had kids, I took my kids. And so Wrigley Field was kind of like church. Baseball was kind of what connected us to each other and to something larger. And so in a way, you know, and that chaplain said, he said, this is really part of your spiritual life, is this connection to your family through this shared baseball experience. And so that's just a kind of far out example, but not, you know, not really. You know, it just,
No,
I hope
I
that
like
helps to expand your thinking about what spiritual life is, and how that connection helps you to cope. And that belief in an afterlife, you know, that belief that, yeah, I will see my loved one again, that doesn't make their absence right now that much easier, but it is a comfort. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, you won't hear anybody say, you know, I know I can look forward to them then, and it's okay that they're not here now. I'm gonna miss them. I'm gonna miss their physical presence. But I do have that beautiful hope that someday we'll all see each other again, and that they won't be in pain, or they won't be, you know, suffering from addiction anymore, or they won't be, you know, they'll be dancing and they won't be in a wheelchair or whatever, you know. So all of those images and all of those beliefs are very powerful and helpful in helping people to cope with that. And it's very real. And you know, help people to tap into that as their indwelling resilience. Rachel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about like an afterlife. I know different religions and different beliefs. My mom is Buddhist and I grew up in a mixed faith household. And one of the things that Buddhists believe is in reincarnation. And so not that you're going to necessarily see your loved one in another life, but that if your person who has passed believes in reincarnation, you want them to be able to transition on into a new life. And there are like practices in place in the grieving process to allow that spirit to pass on. Because there's this thought that if the person who has passed feels attachments to earthly beings who are still alive, then that transition to the next life could be hindered. And so for helping them transition is sort of really a driver of helping you process that grief, because you're doing it in service of that person and helping them transition to whatever their reincarnated state will be. And I think that provides, whether you're Buddhist or not, I think it is quite a comfort, you know. So you're doing this work for your own benefit, but you're also doing it for the benefit of their transitional experience, because we're all going to die, but we don't know what that experience is like, even, you know. So if you think in doing this work, it will help that person feel at ease in transitioning onward, I find great comfort in that idea.
I love that. I've never heard it put that way before. That's beautiful. I love that.
I haven't either, and that like totally feeds into part of like that wondering and that question and understanding that for clients who would, you know, be operating from that system of belief. Like that's so helpful to know.
And you know, when we talk about culture, we'll talk a little bit more about that in practices. And but there are also, I've had family members and members, you know, experiences myself where like they'll see I have a friend actually who every time she sees a dragonfly, you know, she said, that's my mother visiting me, you know, checking in on me, because her mother was very, you know, big on, you know, she collected them and all that. So, and then there's the whole thing about cardinals, which I didn't know until recently. I'm a grief educator. I didn't know that that's supposed to be when you see a cardinal, that a loved one visiting. And I take a running path near my house. And just in the last few months, there's been like 5 cardinals. Like you never see them. And then there's like 5 of them. And I'm like, whoa, you know, who are all these people coming to visit me on my run? So just, you know, thinking about that. And even if you don't believe that it's true, it gives you a moment to kind of think about your loved one and smile. And so that's kind of how I approach that. But I guess we're getting a little far afield, and we're about out of time, but let me see, there's still a couple of oh, I'm read your dad visits as a cardinal. Yeah. My mom visits as a butterfly. So, well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I know it's not required. And to be honest with you, I don't remember if next week is a meeting or not, but I will post that. And I'll be posting the recording of this tonight. And we will, again, if you have any questions about anything, just reach out and check the schedule. The next time is April 17th. Okay, great. So I think, you know, sign up for the check-in. So we have a week off, and then I think there's the check-in, and then we meet again. So take care. Have a great rest of the week. And
where do we find that check-in document again?
I'm gonna post the link, but it's also on, if you scroll down in the course schedule. You'll find it.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all right.
Great.
Have a good evening. Take
Good
care.
night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.